The Duke demanded her hand. She said yes, but had a secret plan. England, 1812, Ravenswood Manor. When the cold, formidable Duke of Ravenswood, Alistair Beaumont, extends a marriage proposal to Lady Eleanor Vance, a woman of fading name and dwindling fortune, the Tun sees only a rescue, a powerful duke lifting a desperate woman from obscurity. But Eleanor says yes for only one reason: not for the title, not for the diamonds, not for the gilded halls of Ravenswood. She says yes because she believes the Beaumont family destroyed hers, and she intends to find the proof buried somewhere inside that manor. She will become his wife. She will smile at his table. She will wear his ring. And she will uncover the truth no matter the cost. What Eleanor never anticipated was that the Duke had chosen her deliberately, that his cold eyes had studied her long before the proposal, that his invitation was not a rescue at all, but a carefully laid trap. Two people, one altar, and a house full of secrets neither was prepared to find, because the truth waiting inside Ravenswood is older, darker, and more devastating than either of them imagined. It does not belong only to the past, it belongs to them, bound together by a century-old betrayal that shattered two families, silenced a forbidden love, and left wounds that have never healed. The closer Eleanor gets to the truth, the closer she gets to him, and the closer she gets to him, the more dangerous everything becomes. This is not a love story that begins with desire. It begins with deception, but it will end with something neither of them can escape. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, you'll feel every word of this story. Subscribe and comment below where you're watching from. Let's fill this room with voices from around the world. Lady Eleanor Vance's fingers tightened around the delicate teacup, the porcelain cool against her skin. A faint tremor, barely perceptible, betrayed the composure she meticulously cultivated. Across the polished mahogany, the Duke of Ravenswood, Alistair Beaumont, watched her with an unwavering gaze that felt less like observation and more like silent assessment. The air in the drawing room, thick with the scent of aged leather and the subtle perfume of hothouse lilies, hummed with an unspoken tension. He had just offered her a future, one wrapped in the gilded cage of a ducal title, and she had accepted. But the word yes had tasted like a carefully crafted lie on her tongue, a promise made to herself more than to him. Her heart beat a slow, deliberate rhythm against her ribs, a drum calling her to a dangerous game. She felt the weight of her family's fading name, the whispers of their dwindling fortune, and the urgent, desperate need that had pushed her to this precipice. The plan, intricate and perilous, unfurled in her mind like a forbidden scroll. Every detail, every calculated risk had been etched into her memory over sleepless nights. This marriage, outwardly a salvation for her family, was her only path to a truth buried deep within the Beaumont lineage, a truth that held the key to her own lineage's honor. She had to gain access, to observe, to uncover. The Duke, a man of formidable reputation and icy reserve, was merely the means to an end. She allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile to touch her lips, a mask of demure agreement. The sunlight, streaming through the tall windows of Ravenswood Manor, caught the dust motes dancing in the air, each one a tiny secret in the vast, silent room. The Duke watched the subtle shift in her expression, the way her eyes, the color of deep moss, held a flicker of something he couldn't quite decipher. A sharp, almost predatory satisfaction coiled within him. Eleanor Vance. She was precisely what he needed. His proposal had been met with the expected gratitude, the polite deference, but he had seen past the veneer. There was a spark, a quiet fire beneath her composed exterior, a depth that most men would overlook, seeing only a well-bred young woman in reduced circumstances. But Alistair was not most men. He leaned back slightly in his chair, the rich dark wool of his frock coat stretching taut across his shoulders. The scent of his own pipe tobacco, faintly lingering in the room, was a familiar comfort amidst the unfamiliarity of this new arrangement. His decision to marry had been a strategic one, born of duty and a cold, hard necessity. But his choice of Eleanor had been anything but accidental. He had observed her discreetly for months. He knew of her family's whispers, their veiled allusions to a past injustice involving his own house, and he knew of her quiet, relentless pursuit of answers. That intensity, that concealed determination, was what had drawn him. He needed a wife who would not merely adorn his arm, but who possessed a keen mind, a certain courage. He needed someone who would unwittingly, or perhaps even knowingly, serve his own agenda. Alistair's own secret, far heavier and more intricate than any she might suspect, demanded a precise kind of pawn. He felt the familiar weight of his responsibilities, the sprawling lands, the ancient name, and the looming threat that shadowed it all. Eleanor, with her seemingly innocent quest, was the perfect distraction, the ideal key. He had a specific room in the manor, a forgotten archive that held what he sought, and he suspected her desire for answers would lead her straight to it. He would allow her to believe she was the hunter while he, in truth, was setting the snare. A faint, almost imperceptible tightening around his mouth indicated the gravity of his unspoken thoughts. The sound of a carriage passing on the gravel drive outside was a distant echo, a world away from the silent battle of wills about to unfold within these walls. Eleanor rose, her movement graceful, her gaze meeting his for a fleeting second. A shiver, not of cold, but of anticipation, ran down her spine. The weight of the diamond on her finger felt less like a promise and more like a heavy, glittering lock. She was in. Now, the real work began. Alistair watched her retreat, a calculated glint in his eyes. He had offered her his name, his protection, his world. He wondered how long it would take for her to realize that she had, in fact, walked directly into his carefully laid trap. The grand oak doors of Ravenswood Manor closed behind Lady Eleanor Vance with a heavy thud, echoing the finality of her decision. The scent of beeswax and ancient wood filled her nostrils, a stark contrast to the fading lavender of her own family home. She stood in the vast, imposing hall, the intricate carvings on the ceiling seeming to press down on her, the silence amplifying the frantic beat of her own pulse. This was it, her new life. A gilded cage had begun. Her fingers, still bearing the cold weight of the Duke's diamond, clenched, a small rebellion against the facade she must now maintain. Every instinct screamed a warning, but her resolve was a steel rod through her spine. She had accepted Alistair Beaumont's proposal with a hidden agenda, a silent vow to uncover the truth about her family's ruin, a truth she believed lay buried within these very walls. The manor felt like a living entity, its secrets breathing in the shadowed corners, its history whispering from the portraits that lined the long corridors. She allowed her gaze to sweep over the meticulously arranged furniture, the gleaming surfaces, the heavy tapestries that swallowed sound. This was not a home, it was a stronghold, and she, its newest, most unwelcome guest. Alistair observed her from the archway leading to his study, a faint, almost imperceptible curve to his lips. He noted the way her shoulders squared, the slight lift of her chin, the almost imperceptible tremor that ran through her when the doors closed. She was not merely overwhelmed, she was bracing herself. Good. He had chosen well. He had expected a certain fragility, a demure acceptance of her fate, but Eleanor possessed a quiet strength, a veiled determination that resonated with his own. He felt a flicker of something akin to admiration, quickly quelled. Admiration was a luxury he could not afford. His own secret gnawed at him, a heavy stone in his gut. The urgency of his quest was paramount, eclipsing all other concerns. He had orchestrated this engagement with the precision of a master strategist, every move calculated, every word weighed. He needed a wife who would draw attention away from his true purpose, someone whose presence would be both expected and, paradoxically, overlooked. Eleanor, with her family's lingering scandal and her own quiet intensity, was the perfect smokescreen. He had seen the questions in her eyes, the restless energy beneath her calm exterior, and he knew she sought answers about the past. Her pursuit would lead her, he was certain, to the very thresholds he himself needed to breach, but which he could not approach without raising suspicion. Later that evening at dinner, the polished silver gleamed under the soft glow of the gaslights, reflecting their composed faces. Eleanor picked at the delicate morsels on her plate, the rich flavors of the roasted pheasant and truffle sauce tasting like ash in her mouth. She felt Alistair's gaze on her, a steady analytical pressure that made her skin prickle. She met his eyes, a fleeting moment where she tried to discern the man behind the Duke. His eyes, dark and fathomless, gave nothing away. He was an enigma, a wall of carefully constructed indifference. She saw the powerful set of his jaw, the controlled movements of his hands as he raised his wineglass, and a cold certainty settled within her. This man was dangerous, not in a crude, violent way, but with the quiet, devastating efficiency of a well-oiled machine. He spoke of estate matters, of London society, of trivialities that seemed to float in the air between them, devoid of true meaning. Eleanor offered polite, measured responses, her mind racing, cataloguing every detail of the room, every servant's movement, every nuance in his tone. She wondered if he suspected her true motives. Could he see past her carefully crafted composure? A bead of perspiration formed on her temple, betraying the calm she projected. She felt a sudden, desperate urge to flee, to escape the suffocating weight of this charade. But the image of her family's desperate faces flashed in her mind, steeling her resolve. She would not fail. Alistair watched her, amused by the subtle signs of her internal struggle. The way her fork hovered for a second too long, the almost imperceptible tightening of her grip on her napkin, the slight flush that rose on her neck despite her cool demeanor. She was playing a part and playing it well, but he was a connoisseur of masks. He knew what lay beneath. He spoke of the Manor's extensive library, a casual mention, almost an invitation. He saw the flicker in her eyes, a momentary spark of interest quickly extinguished. He had planted the seed. Now he would wait for it to grow. His plan was unfolding, precise as clockwork. He felt a quiet thrill, a dangerous anticipation. The silence between them, filled only by the soft clinking of cutlery, stretched, pregnant with unspoken intentions. Each was a player, circling the other, unaware that their games might, in the end, entwine them in a fate neither could foresee. The days at Ravenswood Manor settled into a rhythm of deceptive tranquility. Eleanor moved through the grand rooms like a ghost, observing, absorbing, her senses heightened to every detail. The polished surfaces, the hushed footsteps of the servants, the distant toll of the grandfather clock in the hall. Each element contributed to the suffocating sense of grandeur and untold stories. She spent hours in the sprawling library, not for pleasure but for reconnaissance. Her fingers traced the spines of ancient tomes, her eyes scanning for any clue, any hidden passage, any reference to the fateful year her family's fortunes had turned. The scent of old paper and leather, once comforting, now felt like the smell of forgotten secrets. Her focus was absolute, her purpose a burning ember within her. She felt the constant subtle pressure of Alistair's presence, even when he was not in the same room. His gaze, when it met hers across the breakfast table or during a formal call, held a disturbing depth, as if he saw beyond her polite smiles and measured words. A chill would run down her arms, a warning that she was being watched, analyzed, perhaps even understood. She found herself adjusting her posture, careful with her gestures, acutely aware that every movement could be a tell. The game was more intricate than she had anticipated, and her opponent more formidable. Alistair, for his part, found a perverse satisfaction in watching Eleanor. She was a bird in a gilded cage, yes, but one with sharp eyes and an unyielding spirit. He noted her quiet explorations, the way she lingered near certain portraits, the extended periods she spent in the library. He had expected her to be drawn to the past, but the intensity of her pursuit surprised him. It confirmed his suspicions, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. She was precisely where he wanted her to be. His own nights were consumed by a different kind of investigation. He worked in his study, poring over ledgers, old correspondence, and maps of the estate. The true reason for his urgent need for a wife, for a distraction, pulsed beneath the surface of his calm exterior. A deep, insidious threat loomed over Ravenswood, one that could dismantle centuries of his family's legacy. He needed time, and he needed a diversion. Eleanor, with her quiet inquiries, was serving his purpose perfectly. He felt a flicker of something akin to guilt, quickly dismissed. The survival of his house depended on his ruthlessness. He would use her, just as he suspected she intended to use him. One afternoon, Eleanor ventured into a less frequented wing of the manor, drawn by a draught that hinted at an unused fireplace. The air grew colder, the light dimmer, and the silence deepened, broken only by the soft creak of her shoes on the ancient floorboards. Dust motes danced in the sparse beams of light filtering through grimy windows. She found a small, unassuming door, almost hidden behind a faded tapestry. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird desperate to escape. This felt different. This felt significant. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the cold brass handle, a thrill of forbidden discovery coursing through her. At the very same moment, Alistair, engrossed in a particularly dense ledger in his study, felt a sudden, inexplicable shiver. His head snapped up, his gaze drawn to the portrait of his great-grandfather hanging above the fireplace. A faint, almost inaudible sound like a distant sigh seemed to ripple through the old house. He rose, a prickle of unease on his skin. He knew the hidden passages, the secret rooms, the forgotten corners of Ravenswood better than anyone. He knew the history, the whispers, the places where secrets lay buried. He felt a sudden, urgent need to walk the corridors, to ensure that the delicate balance he had so carefully maintained was not about to be disturbed. His pace quickened, his stride purposeful, a silent hunter moving through his own labyrinth. The manor, ancient and sprawling, held its breath, poised on the edge of a revelation. The small, unassuming door creaked open under Eleanor's hesitant touch, revealing a narrow, dust-choked corridor. The air was heavy, stagnant, carrying the faint metallic scent of forgotten things. Her breath hitched in her throat, a mixture of trepidation and exhilarating anticipation. This was it. This felt like the true heart of Ravenswood's secrets. She stepped inside, the light from the main corridor fading behind her, plunging her into a semi-darkness broken only by slivers of weak light from unseen windows. The silence here was different, not merely hushed, but ancient, as if time itself had paused within these walls. Her fingers trailed along the cold stone, navigating the unfamiliar passage. She could feel the rough texture of the wall, the chill seeping into her skin. The corridor led to a small circular room, barely more than a chamber, filled with an assortment of old crates, forgotten furniture shrouded in white sheets, and a single heavy wooden chest in the center. A thrill, sharp and potent, coursed through her veins. This was not a storage room. It was a vault. Her eyes, wide and searching, scanned the space. This was where the answers lay, she was certain. She approached the chest, her heart thrumming a frantic beat, a drum roll to an inevitable revelation. Just as her hand reached for the cold metal clasp of the chest, a sound, faint but distinct, echoed from the corridor she had just entered. A shoe scuffing on stone. Her blood ran cold. She froze, her hand hovering, her breath held captive in her lungs. Someone else was here. Someone was coming. Panic, raw and visceral, seized her. She spun around, her eyes darting wildly, searching for an escape, a place to hide. The shadows, once her allies, now seemed to press in, offering no refuge. Alistair's footsteps were measured, deliberate as he moved through the less-used wing. The inexplicable sense of unease had sharpened into a tangible certainty. He knew this part of the house, the forgotten passages that led to the old family archives, a place only a handful of Beaumonts had ever known existed. He had sensed a disturbance, a subtle shift in the manor's quiet equilibrium. His hand rested on the hilt of his walking cane, a habit from his military days, a reassurance of readiness. The air grew colder as he neared the tapestry-hidden door, the faint scent of dust, and something else. Something floral, delicate. Eleanor's perfume. A sharp, almost imperceptible intake of breath reached his ears. She was here. He knew it. He pushed the door open, the creak echoing loudly in the confined space. His eyes, accustomed to the dim light, immediately found her. She stood frozen, her back to him, her hand suspended over the ancient chest. A single shaft of weak light illuminated the tense curve of her neck, the rigid set of her shoulders. She was trapped. A flicker of something unexpected, a surge of adrenaline passed through him. This was not part of the plan, not yet. Eleanor slowly turned, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. Their gazes met across the dim chamber, a silent confrontation that crackled with unspoken questions. His presence, so sudden, so unexpected, felt like a physical blow. The air thickened, charged with a dangerous awareness. He saw the rapid rise and fall of her chest, the slight tremble of her chin. He was a formidable presence, his tall frame filling the doorway, casting a long shadow that enveloped her. Her secret, so carefully guarded, felt exposed, vulnerable. Alistair's expression remained unreadable, a mask of calm authority. But beneath the surface, a complex calculation churned. He had cornered her, yes, but at what cost? He had wanted her to find the archive, but not to catch her in the act. Not like this. This moment, raw and unscripted, threatened to unravel the delicate dance they had begun. He saw the fierce intelligence in her eyes, even amidst her fear, and a new layer of the game presented itself. How would she react? How would he? The chest between them seemed to pulse with the weight of generations of secrets, now dangerously close to being unearthed. The silence stretched, profound and suffocating, each breath a conscious effort. This was the moment the game began to bleed. The air in the forgotten chamber crackled with an unspoken challenge. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic tattoo against the silence. Alistair stood framed in the doorway, a formidable silhouette, his presence filling the small space with an undeniable authority. His eyes, dark and piercing, held hers captive, stripping away her composure layer by layer. She felt utterly exposed, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under his unwavering gaze. The hand she had extended towards the chest now dropped to her side, trembling slightly. She braced herself for his accusation, for the cold fury she expected from a man whose private spaces had been invaded. But his face remained a blank canvas, revealing nothing. This unnerved her more than any outburst. It was as if he had anticipated her presence, as if this moment, this confrontation, was merely another scene in a play he had already written. A cold dread seeped into her bones, replacing the initial panic. Could he have known? Had she been so transparent? Alistair watched the subtle shifts in her expression, the flicker of fear, the flash of defiance, the dawning realization. Her mind was racing, a tangible thing in the silent room. He noted the way her fingers clenched, the slight tremor in her lower lip, betraying the calm she desperately tried to maintain. He had caught her, yes, but this was not the precise scenario he had envisioned. He had intended for her to find the archives, to become engrossed, to lead him to what he truly sought without ever knowing she was doing so. This direct encounter, however, offered a new, more dangerous opportunity. He could test her, probe her, see how deep her resolve truly ran. He took a slow, deliberate step into the room, then another, closing the distance between them. The creak of his shoes on the dusty floorboard seemed deafening. Eleanor instinctively took a step back, her gaze fixed on him, like a cornered animal preparing to flee or fight. The scent of old paper and dust, mingled with the faint, sweet trace of her perfume, filled the space between them. He stopped just a few paces from the chest, his shadow falling over her, enveloping her in his imposing presence. His voice, when it finally came, was low, measured, devoid of accusation. It was merely a statement, a gentle probing that chilled her to the bone. He spoke of the manor's history, of its forgotten corners, of the secrets it held. He did not ask what she was doing. He implied he already knew. It was a masterstroke, a subtle manipulation that forced her to reveal herself without ever being directly challenged. She felt a flush rise on her neck, betraying the indignation she felt. He was playing with her, toying with her like a cat with a mouse. Eleanor's mind raced, searching for an excuse, a plausible lie. But his eyes, unwavering, seemed to see through every possible fabrication. She felt a sudden, fierce pride surge through her. She would not grovel, she would not cower. Her chin lifted slightly, a silent declaration of war. She spoke of curiosity, of an interest in the manor's lineage, a thirst for knowledge that could not be quenched. Her words were carefully chosen, skirting the edges of truth, hinting at a deeper motive without ever fully exposing it. She watched his face for any reaction, any tell, but he remained impassive, a stone statue. Alistair listened, his gaze never leaving her. He noted the subtle tremor in her voice, the way her eyes darted to the chest, then back to him. She was clever, resourceful, and utterly determined. He felt a grudging respect, a realization that his chosen pawn was far more formidable than he had initially accounted for. This would make the game more interesting, more perilous. He knew she was lying, or at least omitting the crucial truth, but he allowed her the pretense. He needed her to believe she was still in control, still pursuing her own agenda. His own plan, intricate and delicate, depended on her continued, unwitting cooperation. He gestured to the chest, a subtle, almost imperceptible invitation. He spoke of its contents, of old family documents, of forgotten histories. He offered her access, a seemingly generous concession, but it was a move calculated to draw her deeper into his web. He saw the flash of surprise in her eyes, quickly masked. She was intrigued, and a flicker of hope, dangerous and enticing, ignited within her. The silence returned, heavy with unspoken intentions. Each had offered a veiled truth, each had accepted a half-lie. The dance had begun, and neither knew whose steps would ultimately lead to triumph or to ruin. The days that followed Alistair's unexpected invitation to the hidden archive were a blur of intense activity for Eleanor. She spent countless hours in the musty chamber, surrounded by the ghosts of generations past. The Duke had given her a key, a heavy, ornate piece of brass that felt like a symbol of both trust and captivity. He had simply stated that the documents might provide insights into the Manor's history, and perhaps into the very questions that had brought her there. His calm acceptance of her presence, his lack of direct questioning, was a constant, unsettling enigma. It was as if he knew or suspected her true purpose, and was allowing her to proceed for reasons of his own. Her fingers, often smudged with dust and ink, meticulously sorted through stacks of old ledgers, faded letters, and brittle legal documents. The scent of decaying paper clung to her clothes, a constant reminder of her clandestine mission. She felt the weight of history in her hands, the whispers of lives long past. Her original goal, to find evidence of her family's ruin, slowly began to intertwine with a larger, more complex narrative of the Beaumont dynasty. She discovered fragments of financial distress, of land disputes, of a desperate struggle to maintain the ancient estate. Each revelation was a thread, pulling her deeper into the labyrinth. Alistair observed her from a distance, through the subtle reports of his trusted staff and the almost imperceptible changes in her demeanor. She was spending more and more time in the archive, her meals often forgotten, her eyes alight with a fierce concentration. He saw the faint smudges of ink on her fingertips, the way her hair, usually perfectly coiffed, would sometimes escape its pins, framing a face alive with purpose. A strange mix of satisfaction and something akin to apprehension stirred within him. She was uncovering truths, yes, but were they the truths he intended for her to find? Or was she stumbling upon something far more dangerous, something that could unravel both their carefully constructed plans? His own work in the study intensified. The threat to Ravenswood was escalating, a silent, insidious enemy attacking from within. He was close to identifying the source, to understanding the full extent of the damage. He needed to act swiftly, decisively. His reliance on Eleanor's unwitting distraction grew, even as his unease about her discoveries mounted. He felt the heavy burden of his duty, the generations of Beaumonts who had entrusted him with their legacy. He had to protect it at any cost. He found himself thinking of her not as a pawn but as a force, a wild card in a game he thought he controlled. One evening, as the last rays of twilight bled through the archive windows, Eleanor found a small hidden compartment at the bottom of the ancient chest. Her breath hitched. Inside, nestled amongst dried lavender, was a collection of personal letters and a small leather-bound journal. The handwriting was delicate, elegant, distinctly feminine. Her fingers trembled as she opened the journal, the brittle pages filled with a woman's intimate thoughts and fears. The entries spoke of a forbidden love, of a desperate choice, and of a secret that could shatter the foundations of both the Vance and Beaumont families. Her eyes widened, a gasp escaping her lips. This was it, the truth, but it was far more devastating than she had ever imagined. At the very same moment, Alistair, having finally pieced together the last fragments of his own investigation, stared at a series of documents spread across his desk. The names, the dates, the connections, they all coalesced into a chilling picture. A long-standing conspiracy, a betrayal from within his own family, designed to seize control of Ravenswood through a complex web of debt and deceit. his fists clenched, a cold rage simmering beneath his controlled exterior. And then, his gaze fell upon a single faded photograph tucked into one of the documents. It was a portrait of a young woman, strikingly beautiful, her eyes holding a familiar light. The same moss-green eyes as Eleanor. And next to her, a man, his face obscured by shadow, but his posture undeniably familiar. His great-grandfather. A sudden, sickening realization washed over him. The secrets were intertwined. Their paths, their families, their very destinies were inextricably linked. The game was no longer about separate agendas. It was about a shared, devastating truth. The leather-bound journal slipped from Eleanor's trembling fingers, falling silently onto the dusty floor of the archive. Her breath caught, a raw, ragged sound in the profound silence. The delicate script on the brittle pages had unveiled a truth far more intricate and heart-wrenching than any she had imagined. It spoke of Lady Beatrice Vance, her great-aunt, and a clandestine love affair with Alistair's own great-grandfather, Lord Beaumont. A love born in secret, sustained by whispered promises, and ultimately shattered by a devastating choice. A forced separation, orchestrated by a vengeful cousin of Lord Beaumont, who sought to discredit and disinherit him. The journal detailed the calculated manipulation, the fabricated scandal that had not only ruined Beatrice, but also implicated the Vance family in a series of false debts, stripping them of their land and honor. It was a betrayal from within the Beaumont ranks, designed to sever the bloodline and seize power. The Vance family's ruin was not an accident, it was a weapon. Eleanor felt a cold, burning ache in her chest, a profound sense of injustice that transcended generations. At that very moment, Alistair stood in his study, the faded photograph of his great-grandfather beside Lady Beatrice Vance, clutched in his hand. The document spread before him confirmed the intricate web of deceit, the forged papers, the hidden ledgers, the insidious plot orchestrated by his great-grandfather's cousin, a man consumed by ambition. The conspiracy, which Alistair had been tirelessly battling, was not merely a financial attack on Ravenswood. It was a legacy of malice, rooted in the very scandal that had destroyed Beatrice Vance and her family. The cousin had used the forbidden love as leverage, fabricating evidence to disinherit his great-grandfather, and in doing so, had systematically dismantled the Vance family's standing. He had sought to erase any trace of the true Beaumont heir, should one exist from that forbidden union, and secure his own lineage's claim to Ravenswood. Alistair felt a sickening lurch in his gut. Eleanor's family had been sacrificed, utterly devastated to fuel the ambition of a Beaumont. His own family. Eleanor, her mind reeling, stumbled from the archive, the journal clutched against her chest. The grand corridors of Ravenswood, once a symbol of her quest, now felt like a mausoleum of ancient wrongs. She needed air, clarity, anything to escape the suffocating weight of this new, terrible knowledge. Her footsteps echoed hollowly as she made her way towards the main hall, her vision blurred by unshed tears. Alistair, driven by a sudden, desperate need to confront the past, to understand the full scope of the betrayal, strode from his study, the photograph and documents still in hand. He moved with a speed born of urgency, his jaw tight, his eyes blazing with a cold fury. He reached the great hall just as Eleanor emerged from the shadowed wing, her face pale, her eyes wide and haunted. Their gazes locked across the polished marble, a silent collision of two worlds, suddenly, irrevocably intertwined. The air between them thrummed with a raw, undeniable energy. Each saw in the other's eyes the reflection of their own devastating discovery. Eleanor felt a wave of conflicting emotions, the bitter sting of betrayal, the crushing weight of generations of injustice, and a terrifying dawning realization that Alistair, the man she had intended to manipulate, was now implicated in the very tragedy she sought to unravel. Alistair saw the journal clutched in her hand, the haunted look in her moss-green eyes, and the pieces of his own puzzle clicked into place with a sickening finality. He saw not a cunning opponent, but a woman shattered by a shared history, a woman whose pain was inextricably linked to his own family's darker truths. The cold calculation that had guided his actions for so long began to crumble, replaced by a surge of something unexpected, something akin to empathy, to shared burden. He took a slow, deliberate step towards her, then another. Eleanor did not retreat this time. Her eyes, though brimming with sorrow, held a fierce, unwavering challenge. He held out the faded photograph, his fingers trembling slightly. She looked at it, then at the journal in her hand, then back at him. The silence was profound, heavy with the weight of generations of secrets finally converging. The words, when they came, were not an accusation, but a shared unraveling. Eleanor spoke of Beatrice, of the forced separation, of the fabricated scandal. Alistair, in turn, revealed the conspiracy, the avarice of his ancestor, the systematic destruction of the Vance name, to cover a forbidden love and secure an illegitimate claim. Each revelation deepened the other, changing the meaning of everything they had thought they knew. Their individual plans, born of suspicion and desperation, were not separate games after all. They were two sides of the same tarnished coin, two desperate attempts to right a century-old wrong, to uncover a truth that had shadowed both their lives. The manipulation fell away, replaced by a raw, vulnerable understanding. He saw her pain, her courage, her unyielding spirit. She saw his shock, his shame, the heavy weight of a legacy he had unknowingly been fighting to protect. A bond, forged in the ashes of their family's intertwined tragedies, began to form, fragile yet potent. The initial spark of attraction, once buried beneath layers of distrust, now flared, ignited by a shared purpose and a profound mutual respect. Together, they pieced together the final fragments, their separate quests now merged into a singular, urgent mission. They worked tirelessly, their minds aligning, their resolve strengthening with each shared discovery. The scandal, the conspiracy, the stolen inheritance, all were brought to light. Alistair, driven by a newfound sense of justice and a fierce protectiveness he hadn't known he possessed, exposed the truth, clearing the Vance name and reclaiming what was rightfully theirs. In the aftermath, as the dust settled and the ancient wrongs began to be righted, Ravenswood Manor transformed. It was no longer a fortress of secrets, but a home, infused with the quiet strength of a love born from the most unexpected circumstances. Eleanor, no longer a pawn but a partner, stood beside Alistair, her hand resting in his. The diamond on her finger now felt not like a lock, but a promise of a future built not on manipulation, but on honesty, on shared burdens, and on a love that had bloomed amidst the ruins of the past. They married, not out of duty, but out of a profound, undeniable connection, their vows whispered beneath the same ancient oak where their ancestors had once shared stolen glances, and in the years that followed, the laughter of their children echoed through the grand halls, a testament to a love that had defied generations of secrets, finally bringing light to the shadowed corners of Ravenswood.
You built these walls with silent hands, a kingdom carved from broken plans. I walked inside with borrowed grace, but every shadow knew my name. A vow in gold, a whispered lie, two hearts concealed behind their eyes. You played your part, I played mine too, but neither knew what truth would do. There's something buried in these eyes were cold, but not for long. Something breaking in your calm, a past that neither can outrun, a war that hasn't yet been won. What if the truth was never ours? What if we're bound by ghosts and scars? Not enemies, not by design, but by a love buried in time. This house remembers who we are, not just the wounds, but every scar. We came to fight, to take control, but found each other in the fall. You held the key, I broke the door. Now nothing is the same as before. And if the truth destroys us both, I'd still choose you inside the ghost. In halls of stone, where secrets sleep, we found a love we couldn't